Joining me now, Michael Pillsbury, the Senior Fellow for China Strategy at the Great Heritage Foundation. Okay, Michael, break this down for me as if I'm stupid, and I am. What is lithium and why should I care?
Well, lithium is one of a family of what are called rare earth elements. And they go into the manufacture of all modern things like jet fighters and automobiles and you name it. All of these things are called rare earth elements because they're rare. They're very expensive to mine. They're hard to locate in the first place. In the second place, there's not a lot of profit. So private companies are not too attracted. The Chinese got onto this 25 years ago or more. They realized in some internal secret studies in China that if they could buy up the source of these rare earth elements, which are all over the world, especially in Africa, they could dominate industrial production in the future. How they did this, it looks like they had some help from Western scientists. So you're seeing the unfolding of about a 25-year strategy they've had to try to dominate rare earth elements, lithium being one of them. It's important because of its role in batteries, having batteries keep a charge.
Okay, Michael, can you explain to me why it wouldn't be profitable? And I ask that because just basic economics say, okay, it's rare. You say we need it for all kinds of things, so it's limited and we need it. That sounds like to me it should be about the most profitable thing in the world. Why is it not profitable?
Because you had to know a great deal about the future of the economy and the future of industrial production 25 years ago to know that it was going to be profitable then. Very few people knew that. How the Chinese are able to get ahead of economic growth and figure out what to do is a mystery. We know to some degree how they do it, but it's not just lithium and rare earth elements. Right now, they've got a theory in China that the future of world economics, the future of profit, if you will, is going to be data. It's going to be electronic commerce. It's going to be able to use your cell phone to do all kinds of things and have artificial intelligence on it to make even more sales according to the pattern of your previous sales. They have committed hugely, as Mr. Trump might say, their economy to a data-driven approach. We have not done that. We're still kind of in the old brick and factory approach of going to a shopping center and saying, I think I'll buy that, and then paying with a credit card. China has anticipated a number of areas in the future where they are bidding heavily on their view of how the world is going to make profit. And we are simply not doing that. There's all kinds of reasons in terms of competitiveness why the Chinese are pulling ahead of us in so many areas. But it's not just rare earth elements and lithium. It's not just a data-driven economy. There's several other areas, as many as 10, where they're pulling ahead of us in the military field as well. They've invested heavily in drones, in hypersonic missiles. Our own military has thought this was too futuristic, too reckless. So we are behind in those areas now. Yeah, I think you get the big picture, Jesse.
Oh, great. This all is sounding pretty much freaking horrible, Michael. Let's rewind just a minute ago to something you said. For a bunch of different reasons, they're ahead of us. Well, I mean, we got 10 minutes here. What are the reasons?
Well, one reason is the ideology of our leadership. As you know very well, we have a commitment in a lot of our CEOs that diversity, equity, wokeness, that these are important issues. And so our workforce has to be tailored with these issues in mind, as opposed to the Chinese approach, which is really a very old-fashioned philosophy called mercantilism, that what is best for the market, what is best to dominate the world market is what China should do. And one example where we see this happen, we used to have a total monopoly in the U.S. on the top capitalized corporations in the world. There's an annual Fortune 500 capitalization index, and it usually was all American companies, some Swiss, some British, zero Chinese. That's 20 years ago. More recently, the Chinese have surpassed us. They have more largely capitalized firms than we do. in the top 10, for example, the majority are Chinese. Top 4 banks in the world now are Chinese banks. If you go into a broader set of indicators, there's just a number of areas, the number of supercomputers. I'll tell you one that I had to laugh. The Chinese have now surpassed us, Jesse, in the number of billionaires in China. There are roughly 600 billionaires in China. We have about 500 billionaires. So you would think there'd be some indicators that we would be ahead, but there's very few. That's one of our projects at the Heritage Foundation. We're going to publish an index of these top 50, even 100 indicators, where it's just jaw-dropping how we have fallen behind over the last 10 or 20 years. And part of it, as I say, is the attitude of our leadership. If we had a Congress, if we had a White House that was totally focused on American primacy, American continued domination of technology, global markets, the military balance of power, we behave a lot differently than we do. The Chinese have that approach. So they may make mistakes, they may have cycles of up and down in their economic growth, but overall it's this really zealous commitment in China to becoming number one in the world that's driving them, and we just don't seem to have it.
Okay, something that else concerns me, and gosh, we could spend all day on that. Something concerns me greatly, and that's how many of America's leaders, business and political, they seem to be invested, we'll put it to you that way, invested uniquely in China. Obviously, most recently, we have Jennifer Granholm consulting with China about U.S. oil reserves. But that's one of, honestly, I can't stand her, but that's one of a million examples I could give of our people seem to be bought off pretty easily by their people, and their people don't seem to be bought off that easily by our people.
That's a good indicator, the number of people on either side who are bought off. I would agree with you. A lot of American leaders behave as though part of their duty is to help China. Now, this began with President Nixon and Henry Kissinger in the Cold War with the idea of balancing the Soviet Union, but it went much further. And when the Cold War ended in 1990 or 1991, that you would have thought we would start seeing China as a competitor then, but we did not. We continued, for example, to let the World Bank have the largest offices in the world in China. The World Bank's greatest partner for loaning money became China. And the Chinese, over time, got the largest share of any country in carrying out World Bank contracts. So that's just one example of many where our leadership's consensus is a kind of wishful thinking that we owe it to China to help them grow and develop. And this is part of our duty, is to help this poor, backward Chinese country get ahead. Unfortunately, they did that. They're now ahead of us in many ways. We're still ahead of them slightly in total GDP. They're about 75% of our GDP. But the Soviet Union never got more than about 20% of our GDP. The war against Japan in World War II, that was a country, the Japanese at the time, about 10% of our GDP. But it still took us almost 3 years to defeat the Japanese. So we've created this modern China, something that President Trump used to say a lot. We built China. It's quite literally true. And its policy is still in effect, even as they are beginning to pull ahead of us now in so many areas.
Okay, Michael, can you speak on how China is doing financially? You just mentioned their GDP being 75% of ours, but I take a step back and I look at all the vast quantities of wealth they're spending around the world, all the Belt and Road stuff and otherwise. These ghost cities they build that go empty, they have to tear them down. They devalue their own currency. There's a long laundry, plus the lockdowns. There's a laundry list of things China does that from the outside looking in, I look at it and I say, my goodness, financially, they have to be on shaky ground. How are they not on shaky ground?
Well, in a way, if they drive themselves into a ditch by following the wrong economic policies, that's really our only hope. Because so far, our own leadership has not been galvanized by China to pursue more powerful competitive strategies. So if the Chinese, they're quite capable of making huge errors. 1958, they made a huge error called the Great Leap Forward, where Chairman Mao decided all farmers ought to eat together in the same cafeteria. and everybody should pool their land and have communes. Well, the GDP sank like a rock. There were up to 10 or 20 million deaths because of a famine and because of these bad policies. So that's the case that a lot of Chinese remember, that the Communist Party ideology can lead you into making fatal economic errors. They recovered from that. They made another set of errors in the 60s, the so-called Cultural Revolution, where once again the GDP fell. There were many, many deaths, and they recovered from that only after many years. So that is our hope, that China now is on, as you put it, Jesse, shaky financial grounds, that they'll make errors, that 75% of our growth of our GDP is the highest they'll ever get. That's called the peak China theory. The Economist magazine, the Wall Street Journal are all pushing this now. The Chinese are pushing it too. They're saying, don't worry about us. We're never going to surpass you. We're on shaky grounds. And they have a set of indicators of how they're doing relatively poorly. For example, their average per capita income is only about 1/10 or so of what our per capita income is, or what the Swiss and French and Germans are. So they play that up. They try to pretend like they are the weak country. Please continue these policies we have of helping Chinese growth. I myself, there's bulls and bears on China's future. I'm more on the bullish side. I've seen them pull themselves out of these disastrous decisions time after time. And what they've got on their side, I mentioned this term mercantilism. Mercantilism means you build up your own foreign reserves. In the old days, 250 years ago, it was your gold. Now it's your other instruments, such as U.S. Treasury bonds. The Chinese have almost 3 trillion in their foreign reserves. They can draw on this reserve power to stimulate their economy when they need to. Yeah. We can't. We have almost no foreign reserves in America. We have the gold in Fort Knox, but that's about it.
For too long, we've been led to believe that communism is a thing of the past. But the truth is, communism is alive. It's here, and it's infiltrating every aspect of American life. Introducing the Anti-Communist Manifesto by Jesse Kelly, the practical guide for patriots ready to defend our nation from its most dangerous enemy. Discover the shocking extent of communist infiltration in our education system, their alliance with American corporations, and the twisted truth behind environmentalism. This eye-opening book exposes the true face of communism and empowers you to fight back. Join the fight for freedom. Pre-order your copy of the Anti-Communist Manifesto today by going to jessekellybook.com.